the rise of the need for more IT services and electronic health records and all the requirements around meaningful use. And then, of course, the pandemic, it seems like a lot of doctors are like, maybe I just need to become an employee again. But I'd be curious, when you say that, 3 to 9 year period, what makes you say that's generally a good time for doctors? What's making them make that shift around that time period? What have you seen?
So when a doctor first signs on with a hospital, they typically sign like a 3-year contract. So once that 3-year contract's up, typically in 3 years, then the hospital look at.
Welcome back to Medical Practice Success Secrets. I'm your host, Theo, co-founder of SensorMed, a full-service remote monitoring chronic care solution for medical practice owners. I'm so happy today for my next guest to be joining us today, talking a little bit about her experience. Jamie Spann. She's a top healthcare consultant who has worked with medical professionals for nearly 2 decades, having grown up with a father who spent his whole career as a surgeon in private practice. She decided to start a company to help private practice physicians get and stay in private practice. Her team specializes in starting a private practice, increasing revenue without increasing patients, recruiting staff, improving doctors' online presence, increasing positive patient reviews, and improving workflows. Jamie, thank you for joining. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. You have a lot of great experience. So look, let's just get right into it. I mean, why do you think it's important for medical practice professionals or professionals in general just to start their own practices now with all things going on?
Yeah, so, I think that's a good question, but I don't necessarily think all physicians should be in private practice. I think they got to ask themselves, I really just don't think it's for everyone, but I think they need to know, do they like a steady paycheck? Are they okay with corporate structure? Are they okay with renegotiating insurance contracts once in a while? And do they like to manage people? If that's the case, then I think a hospital employee physician is for them, right? But I think if they're saying, I like ancillary opportunities, I like being my own boss, I want to practice medicine how I want to practice it, then private practice is more for them. And I think over time, we've seen the pendulum swing back and forth a lot. And currently, there's more hospital employed physicians. A study was even done back in 2022 showing that only 46.7% of the physicians are in private practice versus 2016, there were 60%. So I think hospitals have really made a big push to get physicians to work directly for them. And I think they tend to offer, a larger sign-on bonus and a big base. But over time, their salary keeps getting less and less. And what I usually see is after about 3 to 9 years, these doctors kind of get tired of things and they're tired of their salary decreasing and them being asked to work more. And so they tend to want to go into private practice. I think what the issue is, they're just not sure how to do it, right? They're not sure how to get started or what steps to take. And I think that's what keeps them from trying to go into private practice. This is where an experienced consulting group like myself comes in. As a private practice consultant, one of the areas of my expertise is to guide doctors through the whole process of opening their own practice from beginning to end. Physician consultants like myself, we help doctors open doors faster, generate revenue quicker, and then make them more profitable sooner. So I think the question again goes to, they need to ask themselves if they don't like corporate structure, if they want to have more flexibility in their practice and even in their hours, and they want to get into ancillary opportunities that are out there, then I think being in private practice is more for them.
Great answer. I just know the way I grew up, we just knew a vast majority of doctors who had their own shingle, for lack of a better word, right? They were out there talking about private practice, or they worked for a large multi-specialty group, and they all kind of pulled resources together to make it happen. But, obviously the rise of the need for more IT services and electronic health records and all the requirements around meaningful use. And then, of course, the pandemic, it seems like a lot of doctors are like, maybe I just need to become an employee again. But I'd be curious, when you say that 3 to 9 year period, what makes you say that's generally a good time for doctors? What's making them make that shift around that time period? What have you seen?
So when a doctor first signs on with a hospital, they typically sign like a 3-year contract. So once that 3-year contract's up, typically in 3 years, then the hospital look at their RVUs and look at how many patients they're seeing a day. And then they look at all those things, and then they're going to want to renegotiate. And a lot of times they'll either try to give them a less base, more bonus, I guess, based on their productivity. And doctors who work really hard and stuff like it that way better because the opportunity to make more money is better for them. However, I've seen so many doctors get capped at a certain level. So no matter how hard they work, they're not going to get paid more. So these things all play a factor in the contract. And that's why it's important to get a lawyer to look over your contracts, because sometimes hospitals will tend to put things in there that they try not to let the doctors see. And so I think doctors start to realize that between the 3 and 9 year mark, once they realize, oh, my paycheck's less, why is that? And all these things, they start realizing what's going on, and that's why. It's
Point.
like about how long they can put up with it, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, multiples of 3, right? Every 3 years, they're kind of looking at their contract and saying, was
Exactly.
that beneficial for me, right? And so that makes sense. I guess, when I talk to a lot of the practices that we work with, some of them have been in private practice for years. Some are contemplating selling the practice, things of that nature. Some are even starting out straight out of medical school and just say, hey, I want to just do my own thing. So it's just kind of interesting to see this shift. And to your point, it goes back and forth sometimes. Let's talk a little bit about your journey as a healthcare consultant. Talk a little bit about like, how'd you get into this space? I know your background, and a little bit more into how have you helped physicians and what some of the stories of the successes that you've had with physicians, transitioning into their new private practice.
Yeah, so I love it. So my story actually begins when I was a little girl, because like I said, my dad was a maxillofacial surgeon. He was in private practice his whole career. I worked in his office during the summers. I saw the constant struggles he went through. And then after college, I got into medical sales. So I was in medical sales for 20 years. I kept seeing the same thing with all these doctors. They kept experiencing the same things that my dad went through, and nothing really had changed. So I started Business Savvy Physician, and my original plan actually was to create a comprehensive online video library that was specific for physicians to help educate them on the business of medicine. So these videos covered a variety of topics, and they were done by other physicians, because, physicians like to talk to their peers. So physicians and industry experts. These videos were fabulous. But I think I was targeting residents and newly practicing physicians, and I just couldn't get residents to purchase them. I couldn't get doctors to purchase them. I couldn't get residency programs to get subscriptions for their doctors to try to teach them the business of medicine on the back end without taking away from their curriculum. And I also think I launched this during COVID, and that played a factor too. So after about a year of just trying really hard, I decided I'm going to pivot. And I started doing consulting, and I focused on just helping private practice physicians because I wanted to help doctors like my dad. And what I love most is that I get to support and guide these private practice doctors and still educate them on the business of medicine at the same time. So it's been fun.
No, that makes sense. And my wife is a nurse, and I have a lot of family members that are in healthcare. My best friend, he's an anesthesiologist. So I came from the tech field, right? And so I
Okay,
got
wow.
into it. What happened, just like a lot of folks who kind of get into healthcare, it becomes more of a calling than anything. My daughter actually got sick when she was first born. Spoiler alert, she's okay now. Wonderful
Okay.
dancer, 12 years old. But she had a respiratory issue. And so it was a pain for me and my wife to go back and forth to the hospital and deal with all these things. And I just like, there's got to be some technology. At the time, I did a lot of web conferencing. I say, is there technology to do that? Telehealth became the path I looked down. So that's kind of my journey, just and understanding the pain, like you said, these private practices. I just did an interview recently with a billing expert who talked about the change healthcare, right? A lot of practices were struggling, private practices struggling to make payroll because they couldn't get their reimbursements out in time because of that recent hack that happened with change
Yes, that
healthcare.
was huge.
Yeah, so they need help. Obviously, doctors are very smart at what they do, but I think they need to understand folks like us can kind of come in to help, right? Just like they help their patients all the time. Sometimes everyone needs help to kind of get to the next level. And I love that aspect of helping them
Yeah,
from a
I think
business
if they
aspect.
look at it more as like a specialty, right? So let's say you got a primary care doc who kind of covers all the basics, but they'll refer out to other specialties because, another
Good point.
specialty knows more, right? So I think if they look at it like us, for you, if, for example, you are an expert in ancillary income opportunities, right? If they're go to somebody like you to say, hey, I need other ideas. And like for me, even just starting up or even figuring out workflow issues and things going on in my practice, just ask. It's not a bad thing to ask for help. It just gets you there. It gets you the outcome you want a lot faster. It's like
Mhm.
just focus on the specialty that you need for whatever the issue is, just like you would refer out to specialty physicians.
That's a great point. I talk to my doctor clients like that all the time. It's like, how do you kind of think about how you run your practice now and getting in those specialties to kind of help you kind of service the patient? Likewise, that's kind of what we're doing. I just remember, for instance, I know you do a lot of work with staffing. I had a client that was in Maryland area, he just couldn't keep mid-levels. Right? I think what happened, obviously, during the pandemic, a lot of nurses and other RNs and NPs, nurse practitioners, they saw opportunities. They want to do other things. And so a lot of doctors realized they just couldn't keep their mid-levels like they wanted to. So he was having staffing problems. So I said, hey, I can bring in some help to expert. He said, no, I'm going to, talk to some more folks. And that was a year ago. So he's still stuck without the help he needs in order to scale his practice. And then he's wondering why he's feeling burnout.
I see that so often. I see a huge turnover in front desks and MAs, right? Huge turnover in that.
Yep.
And the big reason is I think they expect too much from a lower end person, right? They expect them to stick around and be loyal. And that's not the case anymore. And honestly, in any position, even mid-levels, they have a physician or a practitioner that's sticking around for 2 years, or even a front desk person for 2 years. That's kind of like your average amount before they leave. So if you have somebody for 2 years, you're doing a really good job. And I think your front desk and MAs tend to go faster because a lot of people just don't pay them as much. And I think that's like a big thing. If you find somebody who's worth it, you're better off paying them more money because they're a lot more likely to stick around, especially if your atmosphere is good and you take care of your people and they're happy. It's worth spending extra money to keep them there than to have to deal with going through the process of finding another person. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is not paying them enough. And then also how they're treated in the work environment, right? I think if you keep having turnover of a specific area, what I've seen is something you need to look at. Is there somebody specifically in your practice that keeps scaring somebody off and pushing people out? I mean, you laugh, but it happens a lot more than you think. So
yeah, and obviously the doctor wants to stay high level, so he may not get involved with his practice administrator or practice manager managing that process. But you may need to have some real conversations if your practice administrator, practice manager is really a great people manager, and what they can do to improve upon that. Because I get it, right? They know so much around the human body and all that, and so they kind of rely on the people around them. And sometimes they need to kind of understand that there's a way to really figure out what's really going on among everyone.
I was going to say, maybe that person in your office manager position isn't the best person for that job also.
Absolutely.
If they're not willing to have that, talk and conversation.
Yeah. And it's tough, right? Because the change, I get it, we're both business owners. Change happens, right? Then now you're like, okay, I got to deal with this change.
Nobody likes change, right?
Exactly. When you're trying to I'm trying to focus on this, but now I got to deal with this now. So that's why there's experts and people like yourself can kind of help them, navigate through these challenges, right? And I think that's really important. So let's talk a little bit. Okay, so let's say I'm a doctor. I come to you and say, okay, look, Jamie, I want to start my own medical practice. Where do I begin? I have no clue what to do. Do you have like a high level, step process you kind of go through, a workflow or a framework that you've created to kind of walk me through that process?
Yeah, I love it. That's a great question. And I'm actually working on putting together a webinar on this exact topic, right? So I actually have a save the date type of thing that I'll give you to provide for your watchers or your viewers.
Absolutely.
What I want to do is do kind of a step-by-step thing, like what you're talking about in a webinar, like kind of a quick, short, here's what you need to do. But basically the first thing, again, a doctor needs to ask themselves is, why? Why do you want to go into private practice? I think they truly need to understand their why, because that's what's going to keep them going. If they want more autonomy, if they want, more flexibility on how they treat patients and in their hours, and are they willing to manage staff at least until you get big enough to have an office manager, then I think a private practice is a good fit for them. So the first thing they need to do would be to create a business plan. And I have a great business plan template that I give to all my new physicians that I work with. And it makes it so much easier to have a plan in place, right? And it's a step-by-step template of what is your mission statement, right? And it gives an example and then you put yours in. Your business plan, what you look at, is kind of like a roadmap to secure funding. Your bankers are going to ask for a business plan. And so you need to have one in place, and that's how they'll look at giving you money. But your business plan helps you secure funding. It helps you outline your goals, and you're going to figure out who your target market is, what services you offer, a pricing strategy, and your financial projections of probably 1 to 5 years. That all needs to go into your business plan, right? Many doctors who want to go into private practice don't have the time or the expertise to building a plan like this. And so that's why this template's super valuable and helpful to them in doing that. So first thing, again, create a business plan. Everybody's going to ask for it. The second thing that you're going to do is your legal structure. You need to figure out how you want to set up your company. So by that is, do you need a PLLC? Do you want an LLC, an S Corp? So you're going to look at figuring all that out. And if you don't know what you need, I highly recommend talking to your lawyer about this to figure out what's best for your situation. And another thing that we actually do is we have a vetted network so that if they don't have a lawyer to ask these questions, that's something either we can help do and do it for them, or we can, send them to somebody that we trust. The next thing is going to be location. Location, right? Everybody says location's key. And it is, it's super important. You need to figure out things like your proximity to public transportation if you're targeting people who are more your Medicaid patients or who don't drive. Are you needing a hospital? How close do you need to be to a hospital if you're taking call? You need to look at parking availability, the overall environment of the place. Like, is it safe? Patients don't want to go someplace if it's not safe and it's not clean. And I actually did a really, really good video on this exact topic. And there is a short clip of it that's actually on my YouTube channel. It's like, what do patients look for in a medical practice? So it's free and it's on my YouTube channel, but it just talks about other things that patients are looking for, and it's super helpful. But I do think it's important to choose a strategic location that's good for your patients. And the other important thing about location is you can't start getting credentialed until you have a location. So you've got to find a great place. And a little tip that I like to tell my doctors is look for a healthcare realtor. Use a healthcare realtor. Typically, there are realtors who only work in the healthcare arena. And so they know exactly what to help you look for. They will help you negotiate your contracts with the leasing contracts, things like that. So they're really, really helpful. And you as the physician won't pay them. It's going to be the company who you lease from that actually pays. So there's a little tip. The fourth thing I would say to starting your practice is going to be then you get licensing and credentialing going. So once you get your location, then you're allowed to start insurance contracts. That typically will take 6 months. So it takes a while. That's why it's important to kind of get these things in place. But you need to look at ensuring you have all the correct licenses and practice legally in your area, such as state licenses, professional licensing certifications, maybe a membership relevant to your professional organizations, all these things. So those were the first 4 steps into getting your practice started. And that's what.
While you were talking, I was just thinking, it's like these L's, right? So, you want to build your business plans, you get leverage, you get more capital. You want to be able to have your legal entities set up. And then finally, you want to have location. Those, high level, those are some of the things you want to think through as you kind of build out your medical practice from scratch, if you're kind of going that pathway. Just curious, hope there's not too much of a curveball, but do you help medical practices who are looking, or physicians who are looking to like join a group? Let's say, for instance, there's a large multi-specialty group or someone to say, hey, we want to recruit you to kind of work with us, be a partner in this group. Is that something you kind of help with as well? Are there some gotchas to kind of think through that process?
Yeah, I mean, I can help. It just depends on, again, bigger groups. It just depends on, are they buying into the group? Are they having to work and then possibly buying in? I can help consult them and help them figure out what questions to ask. We'll help them look at contracts, things like that. I can still help get them, connected with other things. Are they going to be having their own practice and maybe sharing overhead? So they still have their own practice and they still need their own logo and their own name, or, they still might need their own name and they're joining the practice with their own name. And I think a big thing to remember with that is you need to make sure you have a clear exit strategy when joining groups. So contracts are super important. And then I highly recommend getting lawyers involved to look over those contracts too. But I definitely can help. I don't help as much depending on how much the group's already done. Some of these groups already have, this doctor will take on their practice name and things like that. So it just kind of depends. But if the doctor has to market themselves, then I can totally help on the marketing side. And I still think even when a group says oh, we'll market you. Well, we got to deep dive into what exactly does
Yeah.
that entail. You say you're going to market me, but like, what does that entail? Do I still need to go out and get my own referrals, things like that? So we look at all that stuff.
Yeah, the guy's in the details, right? Just like any partnership, you want to make
Exactly.
sure you know what you're getting into. To your point,
Right.
you're thinking you got this great opportunity in front
Mhm.
of you. Oh yeah, I'll be a partner, do these things. Oh, but you have to do all these things to meet these guidelines. Market
Yeah.
your own, use your own resources, and then you'll get part of partnership shares. So it's the business of healthcare, right? And
The
I think
details
that's
of your
something.
contract, right?
Exactly. And they need to know all that. And just like you said, even with the employee contracts, making sure that you're going to join a hospital or anything like that, understand the details of what's required. When I think about when you see healthcare, you've been in this for a while, when you say on the sales side, on the other side, there's this big scary word out here called value-based care, moving things away from fee for service. When you kind of talk to your physicians, are they tired or are they feeling burnt out from all these changes that are happening within healthcare? What do you think are some of the pain points that's driving a lot of physicians now when you talk to them one-on-one, whether they're trying to start their own practice or maybe even try to get out of the practice and retire in the next couple of years? We'd love to understand your take on the market. What do you feel is happening right now currently, especially in private
Yeah,
practice?
I mean, the pain points, I think there's still a little bit of stress with the hack, right? I make my suggestions on what I think they should do. I think they're still working out the details and recovering from that. United hack obviously was a really big deal. I think all doctors have their own pain points. I see a lot of recruiting stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
turnover, which also leads to having the right people in place. I see a lot of doctors struggling with recruiting good staff. And I think a lot of it has to do with they're not looking for the right person in that position. They're not paying them enough to keep and looking for more experienced ones and paying more for an experienced one and keeping those kind of people in place. I also think workflow issues are a big one, trying to figure out a better process to maybe see more patients, things
Mhm.
like that. That seems to be a big one. Everybody's so different with what they're, and then it changes. So when I do like a consulting with a physician, I do a monthly consulting that includes like everything. We have
Mhm.
our target things we focus on, like our goals of their biggest headaches. So they're 1 to 3 or so big headaches, and like we tackle those. But things always come up, or they think it's one thing, but then deep diving into the practice, it turns out to be something else. And
Yeah.
so that's why I like do an all inclusive type of thing. Like, let's focus on these, but then these other issues always come up and we got to fix those and handle those too. So,
Yeah. So we had a client, a specialist, a cardiologist. And so he had the great idea that he was going to buy primary care groups to help,
yeah,
with his referral, network and kind of feed it into his specialty and then build something else from there. It wasn't as simple as he thought, right? Because primary
never
care
is,
is totally
right?
separate. Yeah, totally separate from being a cardiologist. And so the understanding of awareness and trying to help that out. And obviously he was bringing on board the physician that kind of ran the private practice for all those years. But then obviously they were looking to retire. And so it was one of those things where they said they want to stick around. They didn't. So he was kind of had this primary care practice sitting there, but it was draining his resources, right? Because he had to
Mhm.
market, keep it up,
Yeah, they
hiring the
don't think about
people.
all these other things that go
Yeah.
with it. I know.
And as a cardiologist, obviously specialty, he was doing fairly well, but because of that, that risk that he took, he was struggling trying to kind of maintain that. So yeah, we see things like that all the time where I get it. There's opportunities, so many opportunities, I think, in healthcare, but obviously just understanding the ramifications of every new
Yeah,
opportunity and see if it makes sense.
right.
I think that's some of the things that we're talking to a lot of our clients about. So, okay, look, you could do that, but does it make sense, right? And so where
Exactly.
you want to go. And I think you made a point where you said that map. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, or what's your goals? If you're trying to retire, maybe it's best not to hire, do a bunch of stuff, but like maximizing your revenue now and accelerating that, so when you do exit, you get a higher multiple. So things like that are some of the questions that that come up a lot of time with our clients. Wow, this has been insightful. I think your background is great, and especially your passion for private practice, independent practices. As we know, hospitals and other organizations are trying to gobble them up. Private equities coming in here. The doctors that try to maintain that, I want to see them grow, because I see, this is just my opinion. What are your thoughts on this, real quick? We're seeing access is starting to back up, right? You see these bigger telehealth players trying to come in and taking patients away from doctors, But then, a lot of people are left out of care, right? I know especially underserved communities, a lot of them just don't have access to the doctors that they used to, right? And rural healthcare is getting devastated. So that private practice, primary care, physician, so vital, needed in healthcare. But I do see that a lot of these doctors are leaving, and it's hurting, populations. That's kind of what I'm seeing, but I don't know if you feel the same way. But I feel like it's so vital for more doctors to take the entrepreneurial spirit on and do their own thing. I mean, what are your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
and I think they want to. They're just scared to do it themselves because they don't know, one, if they're doing it right. And I really feel like a lot of them don't realize there's people out there like consulting groups like mine that can help them. And I think that's
Gotcha.
the biggest thing. Like, they're scared to do it, but they don't realize there's somebody to help them, such as myself. And then when they do see somebody to help them, they're like hesitant to spend the money. But reality is they're going to be so much farther along using somebody, and then also getting help with, like, because we bring to the table more than just like there's so many ancillary opportunities that they could do. Like, my whole
Absolutely.
goal is to help increase revenue without increasing patients. If you have enough patients like you, we look for ways to help these doctors make more money, because as we all know, like, insurances keep paying them less and less and less. So our job and my job is to help figure out, like, okay, how else can we make you money that benefits your patients? And it's not something, you don't want to do it to all your patients. It's not
Mhm.
something about that. It's how can we help you make more money, but also that's a value added to your patients and truly does bring them help. So I think that's a big thing of what I see.
Yeah, I like that. They want to do more. They're just scared. They're not aware. And so
And
the
they're not
goal
sure
is to,
how else they can bring in more money if, like, they start losing patients. But again, there's people out there to help them figure out how to get more patients and other opportunities out there that you wouldn't get if you worked for a hospital.
absolutely. Yeah, I've heard, you're going to pay one way or the other. You're going to pay on the front end to learn the stuff you need to do, or you're going to pay on the back end when you have to unscramble all the messes you made
Yeah,
because you didn't know what you were doing.
all the
And
money
so,
you lost from, like,
yeah,
trying
exactly. So
in the
it's, I
first
think,
place.
yeah. Exactly. So I think it starts with like what you really want to do. If you truly believe that's where you want to go, then go ahead and spend the money now to be successful. So I
Exactly.
agree. And I know you and I as business owners, I spent thousands of dollars on training and updates to keep my business going. So definitely I understand that aspect as well. So well, Jamie, this has been so insightful
I
and
know,
I
it's
really
been
thank you for
fun.
your time. So where can they find you? When's the webinar? We'd love to know more about how they can get engaged with you because they need to be aware of the services you can offer them.
Yeah. So, I mean, just so they're aware of, like, what services I do offer. I can help recruit staff, anybody from front desk to physicians. So we do that. We help physicians start their own practice, which I've got quite a few docs I'm working with doing that. The docs who are experienced or established and already going, we can help them, figure out ways to either bring in more patients, help fix their online presence, make them look better online, which brings them more patients. And with other marketing aspects, we can help them with figuring out ways to increase revenue, right, without increasing patients. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram with the, at Business Savvy Physician. And my website's businesssavvyphysician.com. I can do a free 30-minute consultation for all of your physicians and viewers. I'm actually, like I said, working on creating a webinar that will be how to start a private practice. And I actually have a save the date up so I'll send that to you so you can post it in our link below. And then that way they can, put their name up and they'll get notified as soon as I pick a date. There is a questionnaire on there that asks, like, what's the best time for them. So that'll help me gauge what time of day I do put it on there for. I'll also send you my information so your viewers can get access to me as well. But they're welcome to email me. It's Jamie at businesssavvyphysician.com. And that's 3 S's and 2 V's because people forget.
Yeah, and we'll probably put it in the show notes also. You did a great
Well, thank
YouTube
you for
video about
having
how to,
me.
yeah, you did a great YouTube video on how to start your medical practice. And so
I
that I thought
did.
that was really insightful. So we'll
Thank
put that in
you.
the show notes as well. Well,
Perfect.
thank you for your time. Everyone, go check Jamie out wherever she's at on YouTube, Instagram, and
Thank
all
you.
that. And guys, thank you for joining. See us next time. Take care.
Bye.